The Orlando Magic debuted as an NBA franchise in 1989. By 1995, they ranked among the league's elite. That is quite a speedy ascent, and it took some incredible good fortune to pull it off. The Magic started as a regular, stinky expansion club, but then they lucked into consecutive draft lottery jackpots. In 1992, Orlando received the once-in-a-generation opportunity to add supersized, super talented, instant superstar Shaquille O'Neal with the first draft pick. Shaq helped Orlando win a lot more, so they finished the 93 season with only a 1.5% chance to win the next draft lottery, and yet they did, again, lucking into Shaq's perfect sidekick, Anthony Penny Hardaway, a tall and graceful wizard of a point guard. The Magic promoted Brian Hill to coach this outstanding young tandem, which produced 50 wins and a playoff berth in 94. By 95, Hill commanded a roster deep and skilled enough to play methodical, pass-happy basketball and advance even further. Nick Anderson was a Magic lifer, a big guard like Penny who could defend, pass, and shoot pretty well from outside. Although not as well as Dennis Scott, aka 3D, one of the league's best and most prolific three-point shooters on one of the league's best and most prolific three-point shooting teams. Horace Grant had defected from the mighty Chicago Bulls to become Shaq's right-hand man in the front court, a talented scorer and interior presence in his own right. This developing squad collected 57 wins, one of the best home records in NBA history, a postseason 1 seed, and the franchise's first ever playoff series victory. Orlando won a second-round series against a Chicago Bulls team still straining to reincorporate Michael Jordan after his surprise unretirement. Then, they outlasted Reggie Miller and the Pacers to win the Eastern Conference crown in 7 games. Yeah, in just their 6th season of existence, the Orlando Magic played in the NBA Finals. That is quite a rare achievement for a new team headlined by young players. No matter what happened in the finals against the defending champion Houston Rockets, the Magic looked ready to sparkle for a whole generation to come. Houston won their second straight title by sweeping the Magic in the 95 finals. No shame whatsoever in falling to Hakeem Olajuwon in his prime with Clyde Drexler and a bevy of shooters beside him. In fact, a couple of those games were close, one of them infamously so. Game 1 in Orlando looked like a Magic victory. With under 10 seconds to play, they held a 3-point lead and chances to increase it. But then, Nick Anderson, a 70% free throw shooter, missed 4 free throws in a row, opening the window for the Rockets to send Game 1 to OT, where they won their first of 4 straight. Anderson's failure in the clutch would haunt him, but not immediately. He played an ordinary, solid 95-96 season, and the Magic as a team played even better than that. They exceeded their high watermark to win 60 games, despite Shaq missing over a month due to injury. That is how good this team was. Role players like Anderson and Dennis Scott stepped up, and 24-year-old Penny played brilliantly enough to warrant MVP consideration. Hardaway did not win MVP though, because by 1996, Michael Jordan had fully re-established himself as the league's best player, and the Bulls were back to being not just the league's best team, but one of the best teams in the history of sports. Which is to say, Orlando's window had shut. Their luck ran out. The Magic ended their best ever season hot and healthy. They cruised through the first round, cruised through the second round, and then bam. The Magic didn't have a prayer in the Eastern Conference Finals. Basically no one did against the 96 Bulls. But hey, the Magic superstars were much younger than the aging Chicago core. Why couldn't Orlando just wait them out? Well, a couple reasons. First, the less obvious one. The Magic did enter that 96 postseason relatively healthy, but they left it pretty beat up. Horace Grant and Nick Anderson picked up injuries against the Bulls. Penny was hurt way earlier. He got his knee blasted way back in the first round, but played the whole postseason despite excruciating pain. Put a pin in that. In the meantime, the Magic faced a more immediate problem, and one they may have created themselves. Shaq became an unrestricted free agent in the summer of '96, but thanks to the way bird rights worked at the time, the Magic had a huge upper hand on other teams. They could offer their incumbent star practically any amount of money, and entering that spring, there was plenty of reason to hope Shaq would stick around. But then, the Magic, citing O'Neal's room for improvement, made an initial offer of $55 million over 4 years. An extreme lowball considering the context, the player involved, and the franchise owner being a mega scam billionaire. This bothered Shaq, and reports of fans insisting he didn't deserve a market value contract didn't help matters. Many people believe that if the Magic simply cut to the chase and opened with a serious offer, like the $115 million they put on the table much later in negotiations, Shaq would have stayed in Orlando. But they didn't, and he didn't. The Los Angeles Lakers got the guy who'd go on to help win them multiple rings. So, what now? John Gabriel would have to figure that out. Gabriel had been pulling the strings behind the more visible Pat Williams, but by '96 fully took over as GM. It was his job to replace one of the best and most unique players in the history of basketball. This was, after all, the Eastern Conference in the mid-'90s. The best teams in Orlando's division featured big man legends like Alonzo Mourning and Patrick Ewing. The Magic needed a real center. Right after Shaq departed, Orlando traded some people and pieces for Felton Spencer, a roughly Shaq-sized player possessing a fraction of his skills. It looked like Orlando would go big by committee. But then, after literally one game, Orlando traded Spencer and others to acquire Ronnie Cycli, the center they really wanted, albeit still very much not Shaq. This downgrade and pivot may have been manageable if the remaining Magic players were at their best, but they were not. This is where we come back to that first problem. Several players still carried injuries, the foremost being Hardaway. That knee injury Penny toughed through in the playoffs lingered, and probably worsened through an Olympic summer. It turned out Penny had torn something, and he missed a bunch of November and December recovering from surgery. And then there was Nick Anderson, mired in an astounding funk. Over a year removed from those finals misses, and months after breaking his wrist, Anderson's field goal and free throw percentages plummeted. His shot selection suffered, and his opportunities dwindled. When Penny finally returned for the long haul in January '97, Orlando was in shambles, below 500. His presence helped them get back to winning, but he also staged a mutiny. Penny didn't like the way Coach Brian Hill was treating his players. He led a players-only meeting in which everyone seemed to agree with him, so John Gabriel fired Hill. Orlando made the playoffs under interim coach Richie Adubato, and Hardaway played out of his mind against the Miami Heat, but the Magic still lost in the first round. The punchline to that series loss is that after all the frantic shuffling Orlando did to patch the Shaq-sized hole in their lineup, injuries depleted their postseason frontcourt. The Magic had to check future Hall of Famer Alonzo Mourning with 37-year-old Danny Shays, which isn't what anyone wanted. So that first post-Shaq season was kind of a wash, and Orlando's hopes of getting a redo in 1998 quickly dissolved. The Magic hired a legendary coach in Chuck Daly, but their core took further damage. Three-point specialist Dennis Scott felt displeased about his contract situation. He expressed said displeasure by blasting Big E's Ready to Die and ranting to a gaggle of stunned summer campers. If you don't believe me, here's video.
So if I don't get what I think I deserve in my heart. I am going to literally retire from basketball and run this camp every day.
Not Scott's happiest moment, but pretty good way to get yourself traded. He was gone within months. But the biggest blow arrived once the season began. More knee issues led to another surgery, which cost Penny Hardaway almost the entire year. And yet, despite the above, despite further injuries and a weird botched Ronnie Cycli trade, Coach Daly milked a 41-win season out of his role players, just narrowly missing the 98 playoffs. At long last, the 99 lockout season gave Orlando a chance to assess their post-Shaq squad at something approaching full strength, although without pinstripes. Penny wasn't quite himself, but he was available. Daly got production out of breakout six-man Darrell Armstrong and even pulled some rookies into the rotation. Ike Austin started at center, Dominique Wilkins and his brother Gerald got spot minutes. Fun little team here. The Magic tied for the best record in the East, lining up a first-round matchup with the Philadelphia 76ers, an underdog that revolved around a youngster making his postseason debut, little guy by the name of Allen Iverson. Uh-oh. Orlando caught the business end of AI's playoff coming-out party. The Sixers dominated their more experienced opponent, sending the Magic home much earlier than expected. Here comes a fork in the road we face in many collapses. John Gabriel finally got to see his team perform at reasonable health, and they produced a solid but ultimately disappointing season. Would the Magic keep pushing this roster toward contention, or pull the plug and start over? Many teams make the wrong call here, or they try to do both things at the same time. Gabriel, to his credit, did not waffle between push and pull. He pulled, and he looked smart for doing so. Chuck Daly actually got the ball rolling by retiring immediately after the playoff loss. Thus, Gabriel's first move in the summer of '99, and the first hint of where things were headed, was hiring a coach. Not a pedigreed veteran like Daly, but a newcomer, a recently retired player still in his 30s, coaching for the first time, Doc Rivers. And Doc wasn't going to coach a bunch of longtime Magic vets. On draft night in June, Gabriel traded away Horace Grant. On August 3rd, out went Nick Anderson. And on August 5th, the big one. Penny Hardaway joined the Suns in a sign-in trade. In a single summer, what remained of the 1995 Eastern champion was detonated, and justifiably. Those guys were all approaching career downturns, including the relatively young Hardaway. Orlando's plan was transparent. 2000 looked like a free agency bonanza. Punt a season, stay well below the salary cap, and the Magic might be able to sign their way to a new contender just as fast as they tore one down. This was meant to be the collapse, the intentional demolition. But funny thing about that punted season. In his first year as a coach, Doc Rivers took a truly awful roster, jarred by mid-season trades and injuries, and won 41 fucking games, almost making the playoffs. Truly, truly astounding. I know the man went on to accomplish so much more, but I would still call this the most impressive achievement of Doc Rivers' career. He is, to date, the only person to win NBA Coach of the Year without making the postseason. So that made Orlando's 2000 free agency pitch even stronger. We have oodles of cash, and we have a hot young coach who can win even with a tanked roster. Before free agency came the 2000 draft, where John Gabriel snagged one of the few decent players in a dreadful draft class, Mike Miller. When the summer began in earnest, Gabriel came out swinging, recruiting the biggest free agent names quickly and aggressively. Gabriel would not let the Magic get burned again, and they didn't. 27-year-old Grant Hill, one of the most excellent and dynamic forwards out there, chose to bail on the Detroit Pistons and join the Magic. Another simultaneous sign-and trade brought the Magic their second star, Tracy McGrady, who, despite spending his early career buried on Toronto's bench, looked like Grant Hill 2.0. much younger with even more promise to offer as a big, scoring, ball-handling, do-everything forward. This was an enchanting new core, built in one fell swoop, completely justifying the Orlando tank job one summer prior. Stellar offseason. Now here comes some caveats. Caveat 1. The Hill deal was a sign-and-trade that sent a few players to Detroit, including a young, raw, undersized, not that productive center. Totally justifiable at the time, but, in hindsight, you would have liked to keep future 4-time Defensive Player of the Year Ben Wallace on your team. Chauncey Billups was technically Ben's teammate on the Magic for a little while too. What a tangled web we weave. Anyway, caveat 2. That spectacular summer of 2000 could have been even better. San Antonio's Tim Duncan was a free agent too, and took a meeting with the Magic, a serious one. Some say he even favored Orlando until a late change of heart. Why that change? It depends on who you ask. People said, and still say, that Coach Rivers alienated Duncan by insisting the superstar would not be allowed to bring friends and family on the team plane. Others, including Duncan at the time and Rivers nowadays, insist the Magic lost out because they failed to secure the last word. The Spurs thought they were toast until Tim's legendary teammate, David Robinson, cut short his vacation in Hawaii to fly in and talk Duncan out of his big move. Whatever the case, Duncan stayed put in San Antonio. That turned out well for both parties. So, yeah, Orlando had to settle for only 2 of the most exciting and excellent forwards of their era. Oh well. But here comes the third caveat. Finally a regular starter in Orlando, Tracy McGrady came out of the gates on fire, instantly becoming an all-NBA caliber leading scorer, the league's most improved player by a long shot. The older half of this new star pairing, Grant Hill, came out of the gates, well, he hardly came out of the gates. You see, Hill's last season as a Piston ended with injury. The picture of health up to that point, Hill tweaked his left ankle repeatedly before the 2000 playoffs, but tried to play through the injury for a little while, perhaps because of a misdiagnosis. Well, in a grim repeat of Penny Hardaway's final seasons in Orlando, Hill's ankle became a long-term problem, requiring surgery in the 2000 offseason. From his very first game with the Magic, observers could tell something was off, and that something never came back on, not in Orlando. Grant Hill played just 4 games in his first Magic season. The years ahead would bring more injury, more surgery, longer and longer recoveries, and a horrifying complication that threatened his life. All told, over his first 4 seasons in Orlando, Hill played in 47 games and missed 281. So you can file the Grant Hill what if alongside the Tim Duncan what if, a thought exercise made interesting by Tracy McGrady's continued ascent in Orlando. By 2002, he was an All-NBA first-teamer, a genuine MVP candidate. In 03 and 04, T-Mac was the league's leading scorer, logging some of the most productive seasons in NBA history. But he was basically alone. 01 Rookie of the Year Mike Miller made a decent secondary scorer, but not enough of a co-star to help McGrady carry the Magic anywhere significant. It's tough to improve your roster with a sidelined player consuming so much of the salary cap. And Orlando didn't make the most of their opportunities to build cheaply through the draft, especially in 2001 when they passed on multiple opportunities to draft multiple surprise future All-Stars. These years are peppered with funky moves. John Gabriel traded the future pick that would become Amari Stoudemire. He brought Horace Grant back at one point and then added Patrick Ewing and Shawn Kemp, each in his sad final season, each a sad emblem of Orlando's dearth of big man talent after they lost Shaq and missed out on Tim Duncan. Coach Rivers struggled more and more to find defense in his rotation, but T-Mac's offensive excellence was enough to drag Orlando to 40-ish wins and a playoff berth each season. The Magic just never made it past the first round. This stretch includes Orlando's notorious flop in 2003. Trading Mike Miller netted Orlando their first somewhat promising young big guy in a while, Drew Gooden. T-Mac led the Magic to a 3-1 series lead against the Pistons. Then he sorta looked forward to his series victory, issuing a quote that the Pistons immediately willfully misinterpreted for motivation. Everyone remembers Detroit's exaggerated version of that quote because Orlando blew their lead, with McGrady himself floundering against rookie Tayshaun Prince in the elimination Game 7. The guy Orlando traded for Grant Hill played a pretty big part in that too. And then, in 03-04, the bottom fell out. Gooden and Juwan Howard did not constitute the front court help Orlando needed. T-Mac won another scoring title but missed a handful of games. The Magic won on opening night, then lost 10 straight. They fired Rivers. They lost 9 more games in a row. They demoted Gabriel. At long last, 8 years after they lost Shaq, 5 years after they meant to collapse, and 4 years after their rapid rebuild, the Orlando Magic hit rock bottom for real. Sadly, their demise was enough to alienate the one great success story of this era. Poetically, their losing record begot a chance to draft Orlando's next great star, Dwight Howard, the closest they could get to replacing a unique mega-talent like Shaq. Or, said differently, the Magic got their luck back. The first 15 years of the Orlando Magic, for better and worse, had a lot to do with luck. You need luck. You need it to withstand bad moves. You need it to enjoy good moves. And if you go without it for too long, then try as you might, you're gonna collapse. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Collapse. If you can believe it, we got another one about the next Orlando Magic team. And if you're not in the mood for that, there's plenty more to watch.